The story unfolding in Gaza is no longer a humanitarian emergency alone. It's a moral and political disgrace for the international community. Nearly 4 weeks after the much-celebrated US-brokered ceasefire, Israel continues to block or restrict the majority of aid promised to reach the 2 million civilians in the Gaza Strip. The situation is worsening by the day as the basic arithmetic of survival collapses under the weight of bureaucracy, mistrust and political cruelty. Jordan has accused Israel of blocking 10,000 truckloads of humanitarian supplies, including 6,000 linked to the World Food Programme. These convoys contain tents, blankets, food, fuel and medical equipment, all sitting idle in the Jordanian desert while famine deepens in Gaza. Israel cites security concerns following a broader shooting in September, but the delay in approving new inspection procedures has turned what could be solved in days into a blockade lasting months. The Israeli Coordination Unit, COGAT, insists that hundreds of aid trucks enter Gaza every day, yet the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that the real number is closer to 60 per day, barely a tenth of the 600 trucks required under the ceasefire terms and far below the 1,000 a day that aid groups say are needed to stave off mass starvation. The north of Gaza remains almost entirely cut off, with no convoys reaching it since mid-September. There, children scavenge in ruins for scraps of flour, and the United Nations warns of a famine-confirmed zone. International condemnation is mounting. Jordan's government, backed by the UK and several European allies, has demanded that Israel reopen crossings immediately. Yvette Cooper, the British Foreign Secretary, personally inspected piles of British-bought aid languishing in warehouses in Amman. Her words were pointed: the people of Gaza cannot afford to wait. But diplomatic pressure has yielded little. Israel has introduced a new layer of bureaucracy requiring international NGOs to re-register with its Ministry of Diaspora and Combating Anti-Semitism, a process that demands personal data on all Palestinian staff. This has had the predictable result of paralysing operations, with more than 100 aid requests rejected in a single month. The International Court of Justice, in its October advisory opinion, made Israel's objections explicit. As the occupying power, it must ensure unhindered provision of humanitarian relief. The court found no evidence to support Israeli claims that UNRWA, the United Nations agency responsible for Palestinian refugees, is compromised by Hamas. On the contrary, the court ruled that Israel's campaign to dismantle UNRWA and block its operations is a violation of international law. Human Rights Watch went further, accusing Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war, an act amounting to both a war crime and a crime against humanity. Yet Israel's response has been to double down, banning UNRWA's activities and denying entry to the International Committee of the Red Cross. Meanwhile, Turkey has taken an extraordinary step. An Istanbul court has issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and 36 other Israeli officials on charges of genocide and crimes against humanity. The Turkish prosecutor cited attacks on hospitals, the bombing of the Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hotel, the killing of 6-year-old Hind Rajab, and the blockade itself as evidence of systematic genocide. These warrants are largely symbolic, as the accused will not be extradited, but they mark a turning point, the first state-level judicial action against Israel since the Gaza war began in 2023. It mirrors the International Criminal Court's earlier warrants for Netanyahu and his defense minister Yoav Gallant, issued last year. The symbolism is powerful. As Turkish judges act on genocide charges, tens of thousands of tons of fuel, food and medicine sit undelivered, while Israel insists it is facilitating aid through 2 crossings that can handle a fraction of what is needed. The narrow coastal road from the Philadelphia corridor has become a bottleneck of broken trucks and desperate volunteers. Winter is now descending on Gaza, cold, wet and unforgiving. Hundreds of thousands are sleeping in makeshift tents without proper shelter or sanitation. The political consequences are deepening. Israel's continued defiance of the ICJ and UN has placed its allies, especially the United States and the United Kingdom, in a moral quandary. Both governments publicly support the ceasefire but refuse to impose consequences for its violation. The humanitarian system is therefore paralysed between condemnation and complicity. What Turkey's move signals is a reassertion of legal principles in the absence of political will. It reminds the world that moral authority cannot rest indefinitely with those who refuse to uphold the rules they claim to defend. The blockade of aid to Gaza is not a security matter. They argue it is a human matter. To quote Chris Guinness, the former UNRWA spokesperson, if Israel will not flood Gaza with humanitarian aid, then others must act. 10,000 trucks are waiting. 10,000 lifelines are stalled by politics. 10,000 more reasons have been added to the charge sheet of history.